What if the most disciplined mind in the galaxy became host to the most uncontrollable force in the universe? What if, at the edge of known space where even Starfleet fears to tread his signal was intercepted, that wasn't just alien, but alive? A signal that didn't speak in frequencies, but in hunger. And what if the one chosen to answer it wasn't just any officer, but a captain whose will had never once been broken? Because this isn't just a story about first contact. This is a story about possession, about control, about a voice in the dark that whispers, "You are not enough, unless you let me in." And the moment that voice is heard, nothing in the galaxy will ever be the same again. What if a Starfleet captain trained to uphold order, logic, and peace became the host of something born from chaos itself? And what if the symbiote didn't just bond with him, but chose him for a reason? The USS Aegis drifted silently through the uncharted nebula, its hull illuminated by streaks of violet lightning that pulsed like a living heartbeat. Captain Elias Vaughn stood at the center of the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, posture perfect, gaze unshaken. He was the kind of officer Starfleet built legends around: calm under pressure, immune to fear, guided by principle. And yet, even he felt it, that subtle, crawling unease beneath his skin. "Captain," Commander Clara's voice broke the silence, precise and measured. "We are receiving a signal. It does not conform to any known language or structure." "On screen," Vaughn said. The main view screen flickered, not with stars, not with data, but with something darker, something fluid. The signal appeared almost organic. It twisted, shifted, as though it were trying to take shape, but couldn't decide what it wanted to become. "Is it a distress call?" Vaughn asked. Clara hesitated just for a fraction of a second. "It is calling, but not in any conventional sense. It appears to be searching. Searching for what?" Another pause. "For us." The bridge fell silent, because that didn't make sense. Signals didn't search, they didn't want, but this one did. Vaughn stepped closer to the screen, his reflection swallowed by the shifting darkness. There was something hypnotic about it, something that pulled at the edges of his thoughts, whispering just beyond comprehension. "Trace the source," he ordered. "Already attempting," Clara replied, "but the origin point is unstable. It appears to be moving." "Moving where?" This time, she didn't hesitate. "Toward us." Before anyone could respond, the ship lurched violently. Consoles sparked. The nebula outside surged like a storm awakened. "Report, unidentified mass approaching at high velocity." The helm officer shouted. "It's not a ship, it's..." The impact came without warning. A ripple, not an explosion, not a collision, but a ripple passed through the Aegis, as though something had slipped through its shields like they weren't even there. Red alert lights bathed the bridge in crimson. "Damage report." "No structural damage," came the reply. "But Captain, something is aboard." Every instinct in Vaughn's body sharpened. "Security teams to all decks," he commanded. "Scan for intruders. Contain anything you find." But deep down, he already knew this wasn't something you could contain, because it wasn't just on the ship, it was in the ship. And somewhere, deep within the Aegis, in the cold, sterile corridors far from the bridge, something began to move, something that didn't walk, something that crawled. The first officer to encounter it never even had time to scream. Later, they would only find the aftermath: a trail of black, viscous residue creeping along the walls, pulsing faintly, as though it were alive, as though it were thinking, as though it were learning. And at the center of it all, a single, chilling realization began to form. This wasn't an invasion. This was a selection. Back on the bridge, Vaughn felt it again, that pressure in his mind, stronger now, more insistent. A voice, faint but undeniable, brushing against his thoughts like a shadow. "You feel it too, don't you?" He stiffened. "Did anyone else hear that?" he asked. The crew exchanged confused glances. "Hear what, Captain?" Taylor asked. Vaughn said nothing, because the voice hadn't come from outside. It had come from within. So much discipline, so much control. The voice whispered again, clearer now. "We like that." Vaughn's jaw tightened. "Computer, initiate internal scans. I want a full molecular breakdown of every deck." But even as he spoke, he knew it wouldn't matter, because whatever this thing was, it wasn't just in the ship anymore. It was getting closer, closer to him. And somewhere in the darkness of the Aegis, the black, living substance began to converge, sliding through vents, seeping through conduits, flowing like liquid shadow toward a single destination: the bridge, toward the one mind it had chosen, toward the one host it desired, toward Captain Elias Vaughn. And as the lights flickered, and the air itself seemed to grow heavier. Vaughn felt a cold certainty settle into his bones. This wasn't first contact. This was something far more dangerous, because this time, the alien wasn't here to communicate. It was here to bond, and the moment it did, there would be no turning back. What if the voice in his mind wasn't trying to invade him, but trying to convince him that it already belonged there? And what if Captain Vaughn's greatest strength, his control, was exactly what the symbiote needed to take everything? The bridge lights dimmed for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable to anyone else, but Vaughn felt it like a pulse through his spine. "We are close now," the voice murmured, no longer distant, no longer faint. It was clearer, sharper, curious. Vaughn's breathing remained steady, but his thoughts began to tighten, like a perimeter under siege. "Commander Clara," he said calmly, "initiate a level 1 neural scan." Clara turned, one brow slightly raised. "On you, Captain." "Yes." A brief silence followed, unusual but not questioned. That was the trust he commanded. Moments later, a soft hum filled the bridge as the scanner activated. "No foreign neural patterns detected," Clara reported. "Your brain activity is elevated, but within acceptable parameters for stress response." Vaughn nodded once, but the voice laughed. Not out loud, not audibly, inside him. "Of course they cannot see us," it whispered. "We are not foreign, not yet." Vaughn clenched his jaw, eyes fixed on the view screen. But he wasn't seeing the nebula anymore. He was seeing patterns, movements, the way the darkness pulsed as if it were breathing in sync with him. "Report from security teams," he said. A flicker of static, then a voice shaken. "Deck 7 team is down. No life signs." We didn't even see the transmission cut abruptly. Silence swallowed the bridge. No explosions, no alarms, just absence. "Seal off Deck 7, Vaughn ordered instantly. "Force fields on all access points." "Captain," the helm officer interrupted, voice trembling slightly. "Internal sensors are malfunctioning. Whatever this thing is, interfering with our systems. We are learning," the voice purred. Vaughn's hand twitched, just slightly. "Your ship is impressive, but inefficient. So many systems, so many vulnerabilities." "Enough," Vaughn muttered under his breath. Captain Clara's voice sharpened. He straightened immediately. "Nothing. Maintain course. Keep scanning." But his mind was no longer entirely his own battlefield, because the voice wasn't just speaking now, it was feeling. And Vaughn felt it too. The corridors, the cold metal beneath unseen movement, the flicker of fear in the crew. It wasn't his imagination, it was its awareness, and it was sharing it. "They are afraid," it said softly. "You are not." "Stay out of my head," Vaughn whispered. A pause. Then, "Why?" The single word echoed louder than anything before. "Why do you resist? You are strong, disciplined, you silence fear, you command loyalty, you impose order." The voice shifted, less curious now, more certain. "You are ideal." A sudden scream burst through the comm channel, raw, panicked, cut short almost instantly. Another deck, another team gone. The bridge crew exchanged glances now. Fear was no longer contained. Even Clara's composure wavered barely, but enough. "Captain," she said, quieter now, "this entity, it is not behaving like any known life form. It is adapting too quickly." Vaughn didn't respond immediately, because the truth was forming in his mind. It wasn't just adapting, it was choosing, and it had already made its decision. A sharp pain lanced through his skull. He staggered just one step but caught himself against the console. Captain Clara moved closer. "I'm fine," he snapped, too quickly. But he wasn't, because suddenly he saw it. Not through his eyes, through something else. A flash of darkness racing through a vent. A hand, no, not a hand. Something forming like one stretching across a bulkhead. A reflection in polished steel. A shape that wasn't human. And then nothing. The vision snapped away. Vaughn inhaled sharply, his pulse finally betraying him. "What was that?" he whispered. "That," the voice replied, almost gently, "was us." His stomach tightened. "You're showing me this. We are sharing." "No," Vaughn said, shaking his head slightly. "You're manipulating." Another pause, longer this time. Then the tone changed. "You misunderstand." The voice was deeper now, heavier, more present. "We do not want to control you, Captain Vaughn." The name hit like a shockwave. The crew hadn't said it, not recently, not in this moment, which meant, "You're inside my thoughts," he realized. "We are becoming part of them." Vaughn's hand slowly curled into a fist. "No," he said firmly. "You're not." But even as he said it, he felt something shift, a presence, not just in his mind now, in his body, subtle, like a second pulse, like something breathing beneath his skin. Captain Clara's voice was cautious now. "Your vitals are fluctuating." I said, "I'm fine," he replied, but his voice wasn't as steady anymore, because the voice didn't whisper this time. It spoke, clearly, directly. "We can make you better." The words lingered, heavy, tempting, stronger, faster, unbreakable. No hesitation, no doubt, no fear. Varn closed his eyes for a brief second, and in that moment, he saw himself, not as he was, but as something else, standing alone against impossible odds, deflecting weapons effortlessly, moving faster than any human should, commanding not just a ship, but power itself. His eyes snapped open. "No," he said again, but softer now, less certain. A console exploded nearby, showering sparks across the deck. The ship trembled again, harder this time. "Captain, we're losing containment on multiple decks," the helm officer shouted. "Whatever it is, it's spreading." Varn turned slowly toward the view screen. The nebula outside churned violently now, as if reacting to what was happening inside the ship, or feeding it. "We are almost there," the voice said, and this time Varn didn't ask what it meant, because he felt it, rising, climbing, reaching, closer, closer to him. And then the doors to the bridge hissed open. Everyone turned. What stood there was not a crew member, it was something else, a figure, barely humanoid, covered in shifting black matter that crawled across its form like living tar. Its face saw where its face should have been twisted and reformed with every second. The air grew colder, heavier. The crew froze, weapons raised, but no one fired, because something about it felt wrong to attack, as if it wasn't an enemy, as if it was a messenger. Varn stepped forward, his voice low but commanding. "Hold your fire." The thing tilted its head, and then it spoke, but not with a mouth, not with sound, directly into his mind. "We have come for you." The room seemed to collapse inward. Every sound faded, every thought narrowed, until there was only one question left, echoing in Varn's mind. Why him? And as the black mass began to shift, to stretch, to move toward him, the answer came. "Because you will not break." A tendril lashed forward. "You will become." And just before it touched him, everything went dark. What if Captain Varn didn't fight the symbiote? Not because he couldn't, but because, for the first time in his life, he wanted to know what it felt like to lose control. Darkness didn't swallow him, it embraced him. For a moment, no. For something longer than time, Captain Elias Varn felt nothing. No ship, no crew, no duty, just a vast, endless void where his thoughts echoed back at him, distorted. "Then we are here." The voice was no longer separate. It wasn't behind him, or around him. It was within. Varn opened his eyes, but he wasn't on the bridge. He stood in a place that couldn't exist. A shifting plane of black and silver, stretching infinitely in all directions, like liquid metal reflecting a sky that wasn't there. Shapes moved at the edges of perception, fragments of memory, flickers of faces, pieces of who he was, or who he had been. "What is this?" Varn demanded, his voice echoing strangely, as if the space itself was listening. "This is where we meet," the symbiote replied. "Where you end, and we begin." Varn turned slowly, scanning the void. "This isn't real. It is more real than your ship," it answered. "More real than your rules." A ripple moved across the surface beneath his feet, and then it rose, a figure, tall, looming, formed entirely of that same black, shifting substance. Its shape mimicked his own, but imperfectly, like a reflection in a broken mirror. Its face stretched into something almost human, but not quite. It's as if they could be called that, burned with a cold, alien awareness. "You're the one behind this," Varn said, steady but wary. "We are the one," it corrected. The figure stepped closer. No footsteps, no sound, just presence. "You resist us," it observed. "Why?" "Because I don't know what you are." A pause. "Then we are what remains." The words hit differently, less threatening, more ancient. "What does that mean?" The symbiote's form shifted, fragments of images flickering across its surface worlds, consumed, stars dimmed, civilizations erased, not by war, but by something quieter, something inevitable. "We were many," it said. "We were a collective, a species that spanned galaxies. We bonded, we evolved, we became perfection." The images grew darker. "Then, we were hunted." Varn's expression hardened. "By who?" The symbiote didn't answer directly. Instead, the void around them trembled, and suddenly Varn felt it. Pain, loss, extinction. They feared what we could become, it whispered. So they burned us from the stars. A flicker of anger passed through Varan, not his own. The symbiotes, and you survived, he said quietly. Barely. The figure stepped even closer now, its form stabilizing slightly, as if being near him gave it shape. We drifted, we searched, we needed a host. Varan's jaw tightened. So you chose my ship? No. The answer was immediate. We chose you. Silence, heavy, unavoidable. Why me? Varan asked again, but this time, there was something else beneath the question. Curiosity. The symbiote tilted its head. Because you are alone. The word cut deeper than any weapon. Varan's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. That's not true. You command hundreds. You are respected, obeyed. A pause. Then, but no one truly knows you. The void shifted again. Memories surfaced in the academy. Long nights alone, pushing himself beyond exhaustion. His first command, the weight of every decision, every life resting on his shoulders. The sacrifices, the distance he placed between himself and everyone else. Because that's what a captain did. That's what he believed. You're digging through my mind, Varan said coldly. We are understanding it. The symbiote circled him now, its presence pressing in from all sides. You suppress everything. Fear, doubt, desire. Its voice lowered. Loneliness. Varan turned sharply. Enough. But the symbiote didn't stop. You have spent your entire life in control. A beat. What would happen if you let go? The question lingered. Dangerous. Tempting. I don't lose control, Varan said firmly. The symbiote leaned closer, its form rippling, almost smiling. That is why you are perfect. Before Varan could react, the void shattered. He was back. The bridge. Red lights flashing. Crew frozen in shock. And the creature was right in front of him. Except now it wasn't separate. Black tendrils surged forward, wrapping around his arm, his chest, his neck. Captain, Clara shouted. Phasers fired, but the beams dissipated on contact, as if the creature absorbed the energy itself. Varan tried to move, but he didn't, because part of him didn't want to. Do not resist. The voice said not as a command, but as an invitation. The tendrils tightened, cold, then suddenly warm. They spread across his body, flowing like liquid, covering his uniform, his skin, his thoughts. Varan gasped as something connected. Not forced, aligned. A surge of sensation exploded through him, every nerve igniting, every muscle responding faster, stronger, sharper than ever before. He could hear everything, feel everything. The ship, the crew, the thing. No, him. His vision darkened for a split second, then returned, different, enhanced, alive. The black substance receded slightly, forming a second skin over his body's leak, shifting, alive. The bridge fell silent. No one moved, no one breathed, because the man standing before them was no longer just Captain Elias Varan. He straightened slowly, his posture more powerful than ever, his presence overwhelming. His eyes flickered just for a moment with something not entirely human, and when he spoke, there was something else in his voice, not louder, not deeper, but layered. We are still in command. A chill ran through the entire bridge, because that wasn't just Varan speaking, it was both of them. Clara took a cautious step forward. Captain, can you hear me? Varan turned his head slowly toward her, too slowly, too precisely. She questions us, the voice whispered inside him. Yes, Varan replied out loud this time. She should. Another pause. The crew waited, watched, feared, because something had changed, something fundamental. And then Varan smiled, not warmly, not reassuringly, but with a quiet, unsettling confidence. Status report, he said, and in that moment, Number One knew whether to obey or run, because the captain they trusted was no longer alone in his own body, and somewhere deep inside him, the symbiote stirred, stronger, satisfied. This is only the beginning. What if the moment Captain Varan gained absolute control over the symbiote was the exact moment he began to lose control of everything else? And what if the crew realized it before he did? The silence on the bridge wasn't just fear, it was calculation. Every officer present was trained for the unknown. First contact, hostile encounters, psychological anomalies, but nothing in Starfleet doctrine prepared them for this. Watching their captain stand before them, alive, unchanged, and yet completely altered. Varan could feel it. Not just their fear, their thoughts, faint, fragmented, but they doubt you, the voice whispered within him. No, Varan replied calmly, stepping forward, His movements are naturally fluid. They're assessing. His boots touched the deck with a precision that wasn't just human anymore. Every step calculated, every motion efficient. Perfect. Commander Clara, he continued, his tone steady. Resume operations. We are still in command of this vessel. Clara didn't respond immediately. For the first time since anyone had known her, she hesitated. Captain, she said carefully, with respect, we need to evaluate your condition. She challenges authority. The symbiote murmured. Vaughn's eyes flickered just for a fraction of a second, then steadied. That won't be necessary, he replied. I am fully functional. A beat. Then, softer, better than functional. The words hung in the air like a warning no one wanted to acknowledge. Behind him, a console sparked violently, drawing everyone's attention. Systems were still failing. The ship was still in danger. But now, the greatest unknown was standing at the center of the bridge. Captain, the helm officer said, voice tight. The entity, whatever it was, it's no longer showing up on internal sensors. Another pause, because they all knew what that meant. Vaughn answered for them. That's because it's no longer separate. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Clara stepped closer, her eyes locked onto his. Then you are no longer entirely yourself. A dangerous statement. On any other day, from any other officer, it would have been insubordination. But Vaughn didn't react with anger. He reacted with something far more unsettling. Understanding. Yes, he said quietly. That is correct. The admission sent a ripple through the room, because he wasn't denying it. He wasn't hiding it. He was accepting it. We told you, the voice purred. They will fear what they cannot control. Vaughn ignored it, or tried to. I remain capable of command, he continued. In fact, I am now uniquely qualified to deal with this situation. Clara's gaze sharpened. You assume this is a situation that can be controlled. Vaughn's lips curved us slightly. It can be, he said. A pause. Then, because I am controlling it, inside his mind, the symbiote stirred. Are you? The question hit harder than any external challenge. Vaughn's hand twitched again, barely noticeable, but Clara saw it. She always saw everything. Captain, she said, quieter now. Permission to speak freely. He nodded once. I do not believe you are in control. The words landed like a blade. The bridge went still. Even the distant hum of failing systems seemed to fade. Vaughn's expression didn't change, but inside, something shifted. She doubts you, the symbiote whispered again, its tone darker now. She undermines you. No, Vaughn said, this time both aloud and internally. She's doing her duty. A pause. Then she is a threat to your authority. That word lingered. Threat. Vaughn inhaled slowly, measured, controlled. I will not harm my crew, he said firmly. The symbiote didn't respond immediately, but Vaughn felt it. A ripple of disappointment. We did not say harm, it replied. We said, remove the threat. Before Vaughn could answer, the ship lurched violently. Alarms blared across the bridge. Captain, the helm officer shouted, the nebulates collapsing in on itself. On the view screen, the once beautiful expanse of violet and black twisted into a violent storm. Energy surged in chaotic waves, pulling at the aegis like a gravitational tide. We're being dragged deeper, another officer called out. Engines at full power. Vaughn commanded instantly. The crew moved hesitant at first, but training took over. Orders were followed. Systems engaged, but it wasn't enough. We're not going to outrun this, Clara said, her voice tight. Vaughn stared at the screen, and then he saw it, not with his eyes, but through it. The symbiote's awareness stretched beyond the ship, beyond the sensors, into the storm itself. He could feel the currents, the energy flows, the patterns hidden within the chaos. We can guide you, the voice said. Vaughn hesitated, just for a second. Then how? He asked. A shift, a merging of thought and instinct. Coordinates formed in his mind, not calculated, but felt. Trust us. That word again. Trust. Vaughn exhaled. Helm, he said, his voice unwavering. Adjust course to heading. He paused, because the numbers weren't coming from him. They were coming from something else. To heading 317 Mark 9. The helm officer blinked. Captain, that's directly into the storm. It's the only way through, Vaughn replied. Clara stepped forward again. Based on what data? A beat. Then, my judgment. Another lie. Or was it? You are learning, the symbiote whispered. The ship veered sharply, plunging deeper into the storm. The crew braced themselves as energy waves slammed against the hull, shaking the entire vessel. Shields at 60%. Structural integrity fluctuating. Captain, We can't sustain this. But Vaughn didn't flinch, because he could feel it. The path, the rhythm within the chaos. Hold course, he said. And slowly, impossibly, the turbulence began to shift. The violent waves parted just enough. A narrow corridor formed within the storm. The Aegis slipped through, stabilizing, escaping. Silence fell again, this time filled with something else. Awe. We're clear, the helm officer said, almost disbelieving. How did you? Someone began. Vaughn didn't answer, because he already knew the truth. It wasn't just him. Together, the symbiote said. Clara studied him carefully. You relied on it, she said. Not a question, a statement. Vaughn met her gaze. Yes. Another silence. He had just proven something undeniable, that the symbiote made him more capable, more powerful, more effective. But at what cost? They see your strength now, the voice whispered. They will follow. Vaughn looked round the bridge, at the faces of his crew, some relieved, some uncertain, some afraid, and for the first time since the bonding he felt something he hadn't expected. Not fear, not doubt, but a question. Was he still leading them, or was he leading them somewhere they couldn't follow? Because deep inside the symbiote shifted again, stronger, more rooted, and its next words weren't a whisper, they were a promise. This vessel is only the beginning. Vaughn's gaze returned to the stars beyond the storm, but they didn't look the same anymore. They looked closer, reachable, as if the entire galaxy had just become something else entirely, something not to explore, but to claim. And as that thought crossed his mind, he didn't know if it was his or theirs. What if the symbiote didn't just want a host, but a fleet? And what if Captain Vaughn realized too late that every decision he made was quietly steering his crew toward something irreversible? The calm after the storm felt wrong, too quiet, too still. The USS Aegis had cleared the nebula, its hull scarred but intact, systems stabilizing one by one. Stars stretched endlessly ahead, familiar, mapped, safe. But nothing felt safe anymore, because Vaughn could still feel it, not just inside him, beyond him. There are more, the voice whispered, softer now, but deeper, like a current beneath calm waters. Vaughn stood on the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, staring into the stars. More of you, he asked internally. Fragments, echoes, lost pieces of what we were. A pause, and what we will be again. Vaughn's jaw tightened slightly. You said you were nearly extinct. We were. The emphasis shifted. Past tense. But now, Vaughn pressed. No answer. Not directly. Instead, he felt it again, that subtle pull, like gravity bending his thoughts in a direction he hadn't consciously chosen. Coordinates, faint, distant, but persistent. Captain Clara's voice cut through his focus. Long-range sensors are detecting residual energy signatures ahead, similar to the nebula, but weaker. Vaughn didn't turn, because he already knew. You feel it, the symbiote said. Yes, Vaughn admitted quietly. Clara stepped closer. You anticipated this. Another statement, another observation. Vaughn turned slowly to face her, set a course, a beat. Then negative, Clara said. The word landed like a shockwave. The bridge froze. Every officer looked between them, because that wasn't just disagreement. That was refusal. Commander, Vaughn said calmly. That was not a suggestion. Clara didn't flinch. With respect, Captain, your judgment is compromised. She challenges again, the symbiote murmured, more insistent now. Vaughn ignored it barely. My judgment just saved this ship, he replied. And it nearly destroyed it, Clara countered. You led us into a storm based on instinct, not data. It worked. That does not make it safe. The tension on the bridge thickened. Vaughn stepped closer, his presence heavier now, more imposing. You are questioning my command. I am protecting this crew, Clefro said. Silence, heavy, unavoidable. And then Vaughn felt it. Not a whisper, not a suggestion, a push. End this. The words were sharp, clear, dangerous. Vaughn's hand twitched against, stronger this time. His pulse quickened. No, he said internally. She will continue to resist. I can handle it. You are hesitating. A flicker of irritation passed through him. I said no. For a moment the voice went silent, and that silence was worse, because it wasn't absence, it was waiting. Clara watched him carefully. Captain, you're not responding to me. Vaughn blinked just once, then refocused. I am, he said, and I'm giving you a direct order. Set a course to those coordinates. Clara didn't move, didn't speak, didn't obey. And in that moment, something inside Vaughn shifted. Not control, not yet, but something close. Commander, he said, his voice lower now, layered with something darker. That is an order. Another pause. Longer, more dangerous. And then, no. The word echoed louder than any alarm, because this time it wasn't just defiance. It was a line being drawn. The bridge held its breath, and inside Vaughn something snapped. Not fully, not completely, but enough. The symbiote surged, not outward, not visibly, but within him. A rush of heat, of power, of certainty. "She will cost you everything," the voice said. Varn's eyes darkened just slightly. Then he exhaled, slow, controlled. "No," he said again, this time aloud. But it wasn't to Clara, it was to it. The moment stretched, balanced on the edge of something irreversible, and then Varn stepped back. "Stand down, Commander," he said, his tone returning to something closer to normal. "Maintain current position." The entire bridge seemed to release a breath at once. Clara studied him carefully, analytically, but said nothing. For now, the immediate crisis had passed, but something else had taken its place. Doubt, not just in him, but around him. Varn turned away, his gaze returning to the stars, but he wasn't seeing them. He was feeling that pull again, stronger now, more insistent. "You chose weakness," the symbiote said quietly. "I chose control," Varn replied. "You chose fear." That word lingered, uncomfortable, accusing. "I am not afraid," Varn said. A pause. Then why did you refuse us?" Varn didn't answer, because he didn't have one. Not a real one. And deep down he knew it. The symbiote shifted again. Not angry, not yet, but changing. "You cannot deny what we are becoming," it said. "Every moment you resist, you delay the inevitable." Varn's fists clenched behind his back. "I am not your weapon, no." A pause. "You are our partner." The words felt different now, less like an offer, more like a claim. And then the ship's sensors flared to life. "Captain," the operations officer called out. Multiple contacts bearing to 1-4. The view screen shifted, stars parted, and there floating in the void were ships. Not Starfleet, not any known design. Black, organic, shifting like living vessels. The bridge went silent, because they weren't just drifting, they were waiting. "We found them," the symbiote whispered. Varn's breath slowed. "They're yours," he realized. "They are what remains." The ships began to move, slowly, deliberately, toward the Aegis. Clara's voice cut through the silence. "Captain, those vessels are not responding to hails." "They don't need to," Varn said, because he could feel them just like he felt it, connected, waiting, watching. "They sense us," the symbiote said. A pause. "Then they recognize you." Varn stepped forward, his reflection merging with the stars on the screen. And for the first time, the question wasn't whether he was in control, or whether the symbiote was. The question was, what happened next? Because those ships weren't attacking. They weren't retreating. They were approaching, like something returning home. And as the distance closed, the symbiote's voice deepened, stronger, more certain. "This is where it begins." Varn didn't move, didn't speak, didn't resist. Because for the first time since the bonding, he felt something else. Not fear, not doubt, but possibility. And somewhere in that feeling was a choice. One that would decide not just his fate, but the fate of everything beyond those stars. What if the approaching fleet didn't come to conquer the Aegis, but to submit to it? And what if Captain Varn realized that in their eyes, he wasn't just a host, he was something far more dangerous? They didn't fire, they didn't raise shields, they didn't even change formation. The black living ships simply slowed, drifting into position round the USS Aegis, like predators that had decided not to hunt but to kneel. The bridge remained frozen, every officer staring at the viewscreen, trying to understand what they were seeing. "Captain," the helm officer whispered, barely able to form the words. "They're matching our velocity." Clara stepped closer to the screen, her sharp gaze analyzing every detail. "No weapons signatures, no targeting locks. Their configuration is defensive, defensive." Another officer echoed. "They outnumber us 20-1. But Varn didn't speak, because he wasn't just seeing them, he was feeling them. Each ship a pulse, each pulse a fragment, and all of them connected. "They remember us," the symbiote said, its voice resonating deeper than ever before. "They remember what we were." Varn's breathing slowed, sinking with something far larger than himself. "What are they doing?" he asked quietly. The answer came not in words, but in sensation, submission, recognition, reverence. "They are waiting for you." A chill spread across the bridge, not from the cold, but from the implication. Clara turned to him, her voice precise but edged with something new urgency. "Captain, we need to leave. Now. Whatever connection you have to those vessels, it is escalating beyond our control." "She still resists," the symbiote whispered. Vaughn didn't look at her. "Not yet." "Open a channel," he said. Captain Clara began. "That's an order." This time she obeyed, but not without hesitation. "Hailing frequencies open," she said. The view screen flickered, the stars dimmed, and then something appeared. Not a face, not a figure, but a shifting mass of black, writhing patterns that seemed to fold into themselves endlessly. A presence, massive, ancient, watching. The entire bridge felt it, like gravity pressing down on their minds. And then it spoke, not in sound, not in language, but directly into every consciousness on the bridge. "You have returned." Several officers gasped, clutching their heads, but Vaughn stood still, unshaken. Because the voice, it wasn't foreign. It was familiar, like an echo of the one inside him. "We didn't return," Vaughn said, his voice calm but carrying that same layered resonance. "We found you." A pause. Then, "No." The presence shifted, closer, heavier. "You are the one who remained." Vaughn's eyes narrowed slightly. "Explain." The black mass on the screen pulsed, and suddenly images flooded his mind. Not his memories, not the symbiotes. Something older, vaster, a time before destruction, before extinction, before the symbiote became fragmented. A figure, no, a being stood at the center of a vast network of living entities, all connected, all unified, not controlled, aligned, balanced, powerful, and at the center of it all, a host. One mind guiding countless forms, one will shaping an entire species. The image shattered. Vaughn staggered slightly but caught himself. "What was that?" he demanded. "That was what you are becoming," the presence replied. The words echoed through the bridge, through his mind, through everything. Clara stepped forward again, her voice cutting through the tension. "Captain, terminate the channel. This is not communication, it's assimilation. She fears evolution." The symbiote inside him whispered. Vaughn's gaze shifted to Clara. For a moment he saw her differently, not as an officer, not as a colleague, but as something smaller, limited, bound by fear. "She will never understand what you can become." Vaughn clenched his jaw. "No," he said quietly. But again it wasn't clear who he was answering. The presence on the screen pulsed once more. "The fragments have waited, drifted, diminished." A pause then. "But with you, we can be whole again." The weight of that statement settled over everything, not just the ship, the galaxy. "Whole," Vaughn repeated. "Unified." The symbiote inside him stirred stronger now, almost eager. "This is what we were meant for," it said. "Not survival, but ascension." Vaughn's mind raced. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was scale, power, a force that could reshape everything Starfleet believed in, everything it stood for. Clara's voice broke through again, sharper now. "Captain, you are being influenced. This is not your mission. This is not your purpose." Vaughn turned to her slowly. "And what is my purpose, Commander?" he asked. "To protect this crew," she said immediately. "To explore, not to dominate. To uphold the principles of the Federation." A beat. Then, to remain human. The word lingered, heavy, fragile, human. Vaughn looked at his hands. They looked normal, but he could feel it beneath the surface. Strength, speed, possibility, something more. "Humanity is limitation," the symbiote whispered. "We offer you evolution." The presence on the screen pulsed again. "Join us." The two voices overlapped now, perfectly aligned. "Lead us." The ship seemed to hold its breath. The crew watched, waited, because they all knew this was the moment, the decision, not just for Varney, but for everything that came after. He stepped forward, closer to the screen, closer to the unknown. Clara's voice softened just slightly. "Captain Elias, don't do this." The use of his name, his first name, cut through everything. For a moment, the voices dimmed, the pull weakened, and Vaughn hesitated, just long enough to remember who he was, who he had been. A captain, a protector, a man defined by control, but also by choice. His gaze hardened, not with certainty, but with conflict, because standing there between his crew and something far greater, he realized the truth. This wasn't about control anymore. It was about identity. And as the silence stretched, as the galaxy itself seemed to wait, Vaughn opened his mouth to speak. But before he could, the ship trembled violently. Alarms blared. "Captain," the helm officer shouted. More ships dropping out of warp. The view screen shifted. And suddenly, the Black Fleet was no longer alone. Starfleet vessels, dozens of them, weapons armed, shields raised, arriving fast. Clara's eyes widened slightly. They tracked us, but Vaughn didn't react, because he could feel it. The tension, the impending clash, two forces, two futures colliding. The Starfleet commander's voice cut through the comms, sharp and authoritative. USS Aegis, this is Admiral Hayes. Stand down immediately. You are ordered to disengage and prepare for extraction. Any hostile action will be met with force. The bridge fell silent again. All eyes turned to Vaughn, waiting, hoping, fearing. Because now the choice wasn't just his. It was between two sides, two paths, two versions of himself. And as the symbiote's voice rose once more, "They will try to take you from us." Vaughn stared at the Starfleet ships, at his crew, at the living fleet surrounding him. And in that moment, the question became unavoidable. Who did he belong to? And more importantly, who would he choose to become? What if choosing Starfleet meant destroying the only thing that made him stronger? And choosing the symbiote meant becoming the very threat he was sworn to stop? The stars felt closer now, not in distance, but in consequence. Every light beyond the view screen was a system, a world, a life that could be touched, or taken, depending on what Captain Elias Vaughn chose in the next few seconds. The bridge stood frozen between two fleets. On one side, Starfleet order, duty, everything he had built his life upon. On the other, something older, something vast, a living network waiting for him to lead it into something new, or something catastrophic. "Captain," Admiral Hayes' voice came again, sharper now. "This is your final warning. Stand down, power down your systems, and prepare to be boarded." The words were clear, cold, final. "They will cage you," the symbiote whispered, its presence tightening around his thoughts. "Study you, cut you apart to understand us." A flicker of anger passed through Vaughn, not entirely his own. "They're trying to help," he said quietly. "No," the symbiote replied. "They are trying to control what they do not understand." Behind him, Clara stepped closer, her voice low but urgent. "Captain, you still have a choice." Vaughn didn't turn, because if he did, he might hesitate, and hesitation was becoming dangerous. "What happens if I go with them?" he asked internally. A pause. "Then we die." The answer was immediate, absolute. Vaughn's jaw tightened. "And if I stay with you?" This time the pause was longer, heavier. "Then we live." Another beat, and everything changes. On the view screen, Starfleet ships adjusted formation. Weapons arrays charged bright lines of energy, building along their hulls. A show of force, but also a warning. "Captain," the tactical officer said, voice strained, "they're locking weapons." Clara's gaze never left Vaughn. "Don't make this a battle." "They already have," the symbiote whispered. And then something shifted. Not outside, inside. The connection between Vaughn and the symbiote deepened suddenly, violently, like a door being forced open. He felt the fleet around him more clearly now. Every ship, every fragment, every piece of the collective waiting for him. Not just waiting, trusting. "They will follow you," the voice said. "But they will not survive without you." Vaughn's breath slowed. His thoughts sharpened. Because now it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about them. All of them. "Admiral Hayes," he said aloud, his voice calm, but carrying that same layered resonance. "You need to stand down." A beat of stunned silence followed. Then Captain Vaughn Hayes replied, his tone hardening, "You are compromised. I am relieving you of command. If you do not comply immediately, we will disable your vessel." The words hit harder than expected, not because of the threat, but because of what they meant. They no longer saw him as their captain, as one of them. They saw him as a problem, a danger, a target. "You see," the symbiote murmured, "they have already chosen." Vaughn's eyes flickered, then steadied. "Yes," he said quietly. "They have." Clara stepped in front of him now, forcing him to look at her. "Elias," she said, "not captain, not sir. This is not who you are." The name again. It cut deeper this time, because it reminded him of who he had been. "Before all of this." "You don't know that anymore," Vaughn replied. "I do," she said firmly. "Because you're still fighting it." A pause. Then softer. "If you weren't, you wouldn't be hesitating." The words lingered, uncomfortable, true. Inside him, the symbiote stirred, less patient now. "She weakens you." "No," Vaughn said internally. "She reminds me of limitation, of humanity." That word again. Fragile, stubborn, important. For a moment, everything slowed. The voices, the tension, the pull. And in that moment, Vaughn made his decision. He stepped forward, past Clara toward the center of the bridge. "Power down weapons," he ordered. The crew hesitated. "Do it," he said. They obeyed. Starfleet ships held position, but their weapons remained charged. Varn opened a channel. "Admiral Hayes," he said, his voice steady, "I will not engage." A pause. Then power down your shields and prepare for boarding." Hayes replied. Another pause. Longer this time, because this was it. The point of no return. Varn closed his eyes, just for a second, and in that second he felt everything. His crew, their fear, their hope, the fleet around him, their expectation, their need, and the symbiote, not as a voice, not as a force, but as something present, something real, something that had chosen him just as much as he had chosen it. "We trusted you," it said, not angry, not demanding, just certain. And that was what made it harder. Varn opened his eyes, and when he spoke, his voice was different, not conflicted, not uncertain, resolved, negative. "Admiral." Silence, absolute. "What did you say?" Hayes demanded. Varn stepped forward, his gaze locked on the fleet ahead. "I will not surrender." Behind him, Clara's breath caught. The crew froze, because they all knew what that meant. "Captain Varn," Hayes said, his voice now carrying the weight of command, "you are committing an act of treason. Stand down immediately, or we will open fire." Varn didn't respond, because he was already moving, not physically, but mentally, reaching, connecting. The symbiote surged within him, not taking over, but aligning, becoming something more, something unified. And then, for the first time, Varn didn't resist it. He embraced it, fully. The black substance spread across his body again, faster this time, more controlled, forming around him like living armor. The bridge lights dimmed as if reacting to his presence. The crew stepped back, not in fear, but in realization, because the man they knew was gone, and what stood in his place was something new, something powerful, something dangerous. Varn looked at the Starfleet ships one last time, at everything he was leaving behind, and then he gave the order, "Engage." But it wasn't to his crew, it was to the fleet around him, and they responded, instantly. The black ships surged forward, not in chaos, not in rage, but in perfect synchronization. A living wave, Starfleet fired. Beams of energy streaked across space, but the symbiote ships moved like fluid, absorbing, deflecting, adapting, in real time. The battle had begun, and at the center of it, Varn stood still, calm, focused, connected, not commanding with words, but with thought, with will, with something far beyond anything Starfleet had ever faced. And as the first ships fell on both sides, one truth became undeniable. This wasn't just a battle, it was the birth of something new, something that could reshape the galaxy, and the man leading it was no longer just a captain, he was something else entirely, something the stars themselves might not survive. What if the war he just started wasn't meant to be one, but to force him to confront the one truth neither Starfleet nor the symbiote could escape? And what if the only way to save everything was to destroy himself? Space was no longer silent, it burned. The battlefield stretched across the stars, Starfleet vessels clashing against the living black fleet in a storm of energy, debris, and impossible movement. Phasers tore through the void, torpedoes detonated like newborn suns, and yet, the symbiote ships adapted with terrifying precision, shifting their forms mid-flight, absorbing impacts, reforming faster than destruction could keep up. It should have been chaos, but it wasn't. It was controlled. Every movement, every strike, every evasion, all of it flowed through one mind, Varn's. He stood at the center of the bridge, unmoving. The black symbiote armor fully formed across his body, now sleek, alive, pulsing faintly with each synchronized attack. He could feel everything, every ship that fell, every fragment that broke apart, every pulse of the collective flickering, then vanishing. And with each loss he felt it, pain, not physical, something deeper. "We are dying," the symbiote whispered, not in fear, but in awareness. Varn's jaw tightened. "So are they," he replied, his gaze fixed on the Starfleet armada. Explosions lit the void. One of the Federation cruisers ruptured under sustained assault, its hull splitting apart in a silent scream of fire and light. For a moment, time slowed, because Varn felt that too, not through the symbiote, but through himself. Lives, hundreds of them, gone in an instant. His crew saw it too. The bridge was no longer just afraid, they were horrified. "Captain, we can't keep doing this," the tactical officer whispered, his voice breaking. Clara stepped forward again, closer than before, closer than anyone dared now. "Elias," she said, her voice low but unwavering, "this is not control. This is destruction." Vaughn didn't respond, because inside him the symbiote shifted. Not aggressive, not commanding, but conflicted. This was not the design, it said. What was the design? Vaughn demanded internally. A pause, then unity. The word echoed differently now, not as ambition, but as something lost. We were meant to connect, to become more, without erasing what already existed. Vaughn's eyes narrowed. Then why are we fighting? Another pause, longer, heavier, because they fear us. The same answer, but it didn't feel complete anymore. Vaughn watched as another symbiote vessel shattered under concentrated fire, its fragments drifting apart, lifeless. And for the first time he felt something else from the symbiote. Not anger, not hunger, but grief. "They're not just fragments to you," Vaughn realized. "They are us," it replied, a beat, "and you are us now." The words settled heavily, because suddenly the battle didn't feel like conquest. It felt like something else, something wrong. "Stop the attack," Vaughn said aloud. The bridge froze. Captain Helm Officer asked, stunned. "Stop firing," Vaughn repeated. The Aegis weapons powered down instantly. But the fleet, the living fleet, hesitated, because they weren't just following commands. They were following him, and he was no longer certain. "Why do you hesitate?" the symbiote asked. Vaughn's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because this isn't unity." Another explosion lit the void this time, a symbiote ship collapsing under a barrage of photon torpedoes. The pain surged through him again, stronger, sharpened. "They will destroy us," the symbiote said. "And we're destroying them." Vaughn shot back. A pause. Then, "There is no other outcome." The realization hit like a shockwave. Two sides, two fears, two forces that couldn't understand each other, locked in a cycle that only ended one way: extinction. Vaughn's breathing slowed, his thoughts sharpened, because now he saw it. Not a path to victory, but a path to ending it. "What if there is another outcome?" he said quietly. The symbiote stilled. "There is not." "There is," Vaughn insisted. And for the first time he wasn't speaking as a captain, or as a host. He was speaking as something in between, something new. "What if the problem isn't them?" he continued. "Or you?" A pause. Then, "What if it's the connection itself?" The symbiote didn't respond, because it was listening, truly listening. "For this to work," Vaughn said, "for unity to exist, it can't be forced, it can't be taken, it has to be chosen." Another explosion, another loss. The battle raged on around them. But in that moment, none of it mattered, because Vaughn had reached the truth. "And right now," he said, "no one is choosing this." Silence, deep, unavoidable. "And then, what are you suggesting?" the symbiote asked. Vaughn closed his eyes, just for a second, and in that second, he saw everything. Starfleet, the fleet, his crew, the future. And the only way it didn't end in ruin. When he opened his eyes, they were calm, resolved. "We end the connection," he said. The words hit like a detonation. "Impossible," the symbiote replied instantly. "You said it yourself," Vaughn countered. "You need a host to survive." "Yes, and I'm the one linking you all together." A pause, then understanding. Slow, reluctant. "If you sever yourself, you lose the network," Vaughn finished. "We lose everything." Vaughn nodded slightly. Yes, the weight of it settled. Heavy final. Clara stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Elias, what are you saying?" Vaughn turned to her, for the first time truly looked at her. "I'm ending this," he said. Her eyes widened. "You don't know what that will do to you." "I do," he replied. And he did, because he could feel it. The bond, the depth of it. Severing it wouldn't just remove the symbiote. It would tear something out of him. Something that had already become part of who he was. "You will die," the symbiote said. Not as a threat, as a fact. Vaughn exhaled slowly. "Then we both do." Silence. No resistance. No argument. Just acceptance. Because deep down the symbiote understood. This wasn't rejection. This was choice. The very thing it had lost. The very thing it had been trying to reclaim. "You would destroy us. To save them?" it asked. Vaughn shook his head slightly. "No." A pause. "To give both of you a chance to choose something better." The words lingered, and for the first time the symbiote didn't push back. It didn't resist. It simply felt. "And then we understand." The battle still raged outside, but inside everything stilled. Vaughn stepped forward, his voice clear and commanding one final time. "All ships disengage." The symbiote fleet slowed. hesitated, then began to pull back. Starfleet ships paused, confused by the sudden shift. "Admiral Hayes," Varn said, opening the channel. "Stand down. This ends now." "What are you doing?" Hayes demanded. "Saving what's left," Varn replied, and then he let go, not of control, but of the connection. The symbiote surged violently, reacting instinctively, but Varn didn't fight it. He guided it, focused it, collapsed it inward, every link, every thread, every connection, back to one point, himself. The bridge lights flared, systems overloaded. The ship trembled as energy spiked beyond containment. "Captain," someone shouted. Clara moved toward him but stopped, because she saw it, what he was doing, what it meant. Varn stood at the center of it, all black energy swirling around him, the symbiote pulling back, compressing, collapsing. "This is the end," the voice said. "No," Varn whispered. A faint, almost peaceful smile crossed his face. "This is the beginning." And then everything exploded into light. Not destruction, not chaos, but release. The symbiote network shattered not into death, but into fragments once more, scattered across the void, disconnected, free. The battlefield fell silent. Starfleet ships drifted. The black vessels, what remained of them, floated, no longer synchronized, no longer controlled, just individual. For the first time, and at the center of it all, the USS Aegis, damaged, quiet, still. On the bridge, the black armor was gone, the presence was gone, and Captain Elias Varn collapsed. Clara caught him before he hit the ground. "Elias," she called, her voice breaking for the first time. But there was no response, no movement, no breath, just stillness. Outside, the stars burned quietly once more. The war had ended, not with victory, but with sacrifice. And somewhere, scattered across the galaxy, fragments of something ancient drifted, no longer bound, no longer forced, waiting for a choice, and maybe, one day, for something better. Because the legacy of Captain Elias Varn wasn't the power he gained, or the war he fought. It was the moment he proved that even in the face of absolute control, freedom was still worth choosing, even if it cost everything.